Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this village board meeting to order on Monday, November 19, 2018, and ask if you would please rise and join the village board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call a roll?
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
Trustee Blackwood. Trustee Glasgow.
Here.
Trustee Baldino.
Here.
Trustee Sidor.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and we have two sets of minutes to approve tonight, both from the meetings on November 5th, 2018. The first is the Committee of the Whole minutes. Any changes or passes?
Pass.
Passed by Trustee Baldino.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, the village board meeting minutes from the same evening. Another pass from Trustee Baldino.
Pass.
And how about a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
By Trustee LaBedz, seconded by Trustee Rosenberg. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we move on to the approval of the accounts payable, and I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move approval of the warrant register with a check date of November 15, 2018 in the amount of $2,098,364.96.
Second.
I have a motion to approve by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Glasgow. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Glasgow.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Sidor.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, we move on to recognitions and presentations, and tonight we have a very special recognition and presentation of the John Hersey High School boys cross-country team. Really one of the best cross-country teams that this area has ever seen, and really one of the best athletic teams that this area has ever seen. They're a very accomplished group of young men that I've personally had the chance to witness, both at Bussey Woods during the sectional meet and then down at Detweiler Park. I have to admit, though, that I was down at Detweiler to watch my niece run. She qualified as an individual for Glenbrook South, and the girls ran before the boys, so I have to admit, guys, that I did leave before your race down at Detweiler, but I know what you did. So that's why you're here tonight. The John Hersey High School boys cross-country team earned state runner-up in Class 3A. That's second overall. And junior Josh Methner was the state champion in Class 3A. So we're very, very honored to have this outstanding group of young men here with us tonight. Their season is not over yet, however. They may mention this in just a few minutes, but after their formal school season was over, they are continuing to compete as a club. I believe your name is the Arlington Club, is that right? Arlington, Club Arlington. So great to continue to represent our great community in an outstanding way. Through the Nike Cross Country Championships, they competed down in Terre Haute a couple of weekends ago, and the team earned first place in the Midwest Regional, and Josh Methner came in second overall in the Midwest meet. And so now they're headed to Portland, Oregon for the Nike Cross Country National Championships on December 1st. So they're continuing to represent themselves, their families, and our great community in an outstanding way. So if I could call up just at the present time their coach, Kevin Young, and we will recognize each boy individually and then the team collectively. Come up front there, Kevin.
Oh, front. Never mind.
I'll give you these. Please, yep.
Oh, some of them are not here.
Okay, that's fine. You could just read their names.
Just
so.
a seven.
Yep.
Quinn Bourne,
Just a seven from state. Ryan Buck.
Congratulations. Nice job.
Nick Caraba. Tim Choma. Josh Harden.
Congratulations, Josh. Nice job.
Luke Linscott. Thomas McCarthy.
Congratulations.
Josh Methner.
Josh, congratulations.
Connor Euler. Jason Palafox. Colin Safford. Sam Stubbs.
They're all doing homework.
Max Saventi.
Max, congratulations.
Last but not least, Luis Vasquez.
Luis, congratulations. Stay here for just a second. Let me read this official proclamation. The Village of Arlington Heights recognizes the John Hersey High School 2018 Boys All-State Cross Country Team, IHSA, second overall in Class 3A. Whereas, with the leadership, support, and commitment of head coach Kevin Young and assistant coach Greg Moreland, the John Hersey High School Boys Cross Country Team's fall 2018 season was one for the record books, and their outstanding achievements reflect great credit on themselves, their families, their school, and their community. And whereas the team's individual and collective talent, dedication, and hard work earned them recognition as 2018 MSL Conference Champions, IHSA Regional Champion, and IHSA Sectional Champions. And whereas on November 3rd, the best cross-country teams from over 760 public and private schools in Illinois came together at Detweiler Park in Peoria, with the Huskies capturing second place overall in Class 3A. Whereas junior Josh Methner captured the overall IHSA individual state title with a school record time of 14 minutes, 11 seconds, which was the fastest time of the day from every class competing. That's for 3 miles. Whereas the outstanding young men of the Hersey team include these men who have already been introduced. Now, therefore, I, Thomas W. Hayes, Mayor of the Village of Arlington Heights, along with the Arlington Heights Village Board of Trustees, do hereby offer congratulations to the John Hersey High School Boys Cross Country Team for their amazing achievements and thank them for representing Arlington Heights in such an outstanding way. Congratulations to you all, Coach. Congratulations. And let me give this to you, and then if you want to introduce whoever, you want to say a few words, and then whoever you're spoken.
I don't think I have much more to say after that. Division champs, regional champs, sectional champs, state runner-up, and then they redeemed their one defeat at the IHSA level last week and take down the state champs. Great group of guys, awesome group of parents. The community is awesome, and so this is what happens. That's all I got to say.
Who's going to be the spokesman?
Yeah, so I didn't practice speech at all for this, so this will be fun. Us three we had 3 seniors this year, and this team's been our family all 4 years, and it's really sad to know that this was our last year here, and we definitely left it off on a bang and just competed our hearts out, and still have one more race for nationals at December 1st. So we're just excited to represent Arlington Heights as well as we can. So yeah.
Thank you all.
One, two, and three. Great, thank you. Congratulations.
Hold on.
Everybody got it? Thanks again, guys. Congratulations. Good luck.
Coach. This one. Want the other?
Actually, those get to the boys who are here. Thanks a lot. Well, some of you know that I'm a recreational runner myself, but I only run as fast as them in my dreams. And so they are some really fast individuals, and it's as a result of their dedication and hard work. So congratulations again to the Hersey Huskies. All right, we move on then in the agenda to citizens to be heard. And I have no blue cards from anyone who wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. We would then move on to old business. And we do have one item to report out from our meeting earlier this evening, and I call on Trustee Glasgow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move now, as I did then, for consideration for the village board to accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to the Liquor Commissioner the issuance of a Class B, E, and T liquor licenses to Beer on the Wall LLC, DBA Beer on the Wall, located at 2 North Dutton.
Second. Motion by Trustee Glasgow, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience on this? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Pass.
And a pass for Trustee Tinaglia. And is the petitioner still present? Or in the back, okay. Tell us again when you plan to open.
Spring of 2019.
All right, good luck to you. We move on in the agenda to the report from the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 14, 2018. And I call on Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move tonight, as I did then, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to the Board of Trustees that the Board acknowledge with thanks the proposed budget for the Arlington Heights Memorial Library Fund.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Tinaglia, second by Trustee LaBedz. Any questions or comments from the board? Trustee
Pass.
Glasgow. Pass for Trustee Glasgow. Anything further from the board? Anything from the audience? Saying none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we move on to the report from the Committee of the Whole meeting from November 15, 2018. And we did have a couple of budgetary items that were the culmination of our budgetary process for the upcoming budget year. I just want to acknowledge again all the hard work on the part of our village staff and leadership in coming up with a budget that is fiscally prudent, but still maintains high-quality services that our residents come to expect. So I think it will be money well spent, as is our practice here in the village of Arlington Heights. So with that, I would call on Trustee Tinaglia. No? Trustee LaBedz with the first motion.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I move tonight, as I did then, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to the Village Board to authorize staff to prepare the villages and the Arlington Heights Memorial Library's 2018 tax levy ordinance reflecting an estimated total tax levy of $50,800,520 or a 1.70%, increase over the 2017 extended tax levy for the village and library portion of the levy.
Second.
Motion by trustee LaBedz, second by trustee Baldino. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none. Anything from the audience? Roll call on this?
Is that the card?
Old
No.
business C and D. It is a card. We do have one item. One individual wishes to speak to the village board on this agenda item. And Peg Lane. And Peg, you're just reminded of the 3-minute time limit.
So I'm Peg Lane from the People's Lobby and Reclaim Chicago Northwest Suburbs. I wonder how sincerely the board is interested in public comment on any of the budget items, because to bring up public comment or public input into the budget at this point, right before it's voted on, when the budget was initiated in June, is not sincerely showing interest in what the public thinks of the budget. So it was mentioned last year, and we're recommending again that you consider bringing public comment into the process a lot sooner for a truly democratic process for Arlington Heights.
All right, thank you. Just in response, all of our meetings have been open to the public and published, and certainly you and others were present at our public hearings, and comment was invited, and you and others made comments during our 2 budget sessions last week. So I would respectfully disagree that the public has not had an opportunity to comment on the budget. The budget was also available online, and comments were solicited that way. So there's been many different ways. Mr. Recklaus, do you have something to add?
I was just going to add as well that the final vote on the budget won't occur until December, and there will be opportunity for public comment at that point. We did put out a call for questions from the public, and we did receive some. We put all of the questions and all of the answers that we received on our website so that everyone could see the exchange. We made copies of the budget available at village facilities and the library. I personally gave a presentation on the budget at a lunch session at the senior center, and we've been trying to reach out. It's one of those things where it's difficult to get, during that window, to try to get people to read the budget because it's a very large, daunting document. But we also provide a budget and brief document that make it a little bit easier to digest. But it is a challenge, and I think we're always open to input on how we can make that process better.
Will you meet with us?
Certainly, I can give you my business card. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Yeah, we can give some very particular ways that it could be improved with items on the agenda and encouraging more meetings where there really is a listening process and it's not just at the end.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the board on this agenda item? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second for item.
A voice vote is fine for this.
T,
This
voice
is just
vote.
directing staff to prepare the ordinances.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And next motion was by trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move now, as I did on November 15th, to recommend to the Board of Trustees that the board approve the proposed 2019 budget as amended through the review process.
Second the motion.
Motion by trustee Scaletta, seconded by trustee Sidor. Questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Would you come forward?
Melissa Kerr, does the revenue for arts and entertainment include tips? Are tips subject to the food and beverage tax?
No.
No, no.
So tips are not included in the revenue for arts and entertainment.
Correct.
Should it be?
No, that's not taxable. The tax is on the food and beverage, not on the tips that
But
somebody
should
has.
it be included in the revenue?
No.
Okay. The community profile should include, along with median income, the mean, mode, and range, and the community profile should include household debt. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Anyone else in the audience wish to address the board on this agenda item? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you all again for your hard work in getting us to this point in the process. We move on then in the agenda to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Any members of the audience who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by trustee Glasgow, second by trustee Tinaglia. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Glasgow,
Yes.
trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
trustee Baldino,
Yes.
trustee Sidor,
Yes.
trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Move on then to new business, and we have 3 new business items tonight. The first is a request for an amendment to the something. What's the amendment to?
It's an amendment to an existing
Special use permit and variation request for Taco Bell redevelopment located at 1530 West Algonquin Road. Is the petitioner present? Why don't you come forward? And just introduce yourself for the record, if you would.
Good evening, Mayor, Village Board. My name is Mario Valentini. I'm with MRV Architects. This is
Good evening. My name is Alfred Teleron, also with MRV Architects.
We're here, obviously, to review with you the redevelopment of the property that currently has Taco Bell at 1530 West Algonquin Road. As a part of the redevelopment, it's a full-scale redevelopment, so it's a scrape and rebuild of the entire building. A majority of the site configuration is the same, but there's a little bit of some difference to make things kind of improve some things, work in stormwater management practices, just kind of basically updating everything needed to operate this building properly. As a part of doing that, though, we do have, so it is an amendment to the special use that was already in place back in 1983. I think also, as a part of this redevelopment, there's a slight variance that we're requesting. It's a 1-foot variance to the drive aisle width that is in the front of the building, and that's basically to accommodate a potential future widening of Algonquin Road in that area if IDOT chooses to continue with their discussions about creating a right turn lane for Algonquin Road at New Wilkie. But I mean, ultimately, to keep a long story short, we're scraping and rebuilding and redeveloping the entire property. We have members of ownership here in case there's any questions that need to be answered as far as operation of the restaurant currently and in the future. So we appreciate the opportunity to bring this to your attention and look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Anything from the staff before we go to questions?
It does come to you with a positive recommendation from the Plan Commission and the Staff Development Committee, and I'll just be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, do you know what kind of fences exists in the back of the property there that borders to the residential area to the north?
I think it's a variety of different fences. So that alley there is not owned by this petitioner. It's owned by the grocery store to the east. So they have rights for ingress egress, but they don't own that. So their property goes up to the south edge of that driveway at this point.
Okay.
I know there were some questions at Plan Commission from those residents, about the condition of that driveway. and some speeding and other issues. So we have advised the police department and the health department to go out and kind of monitor the situation from time to time.
Is it possible as part of the lease or part of this redevelopment that we could require an improvement, A, to the fence in the back and B, to the drive aisle in the back?
We have been looking into that. As far as we understand, the easement is part of a recorded plat of subdivision, and there's no shared maintenance responsibility from this property. We have asked the petitioner to advise if they have any additional information relative to any maintenance obligations that they may have. Failing that, the only thing we can do is just make sure that this site is fully up to code with landscaping and things of that nature.
Is the petitioner here that they could address that issue at all?
I've been in contact with the petitioner. Well, the petitioner's here, but we've had discussions regarding this. The property is leased. In addition to that, there are no kind of maintenance obligations by the Taco Bell for that area, the alley. Literally, as staff has mentioned, it's cross-access only. Obviously, the other issue is that, wanting to be good neighbors, they do police the situation as much as possible with trying to keep trash trash getting out of the trash enclosure, trying to keep that to a minimum. So using covered containers, the fenced-in enclosure helps. So for the most part, they're trying to do what they can to minimize at least litter. And as a part of this redevelopment, I think with the petition, I think the concerns of the resident that came to the planning meeting was about noise. And we've made some changes to the site plan to help mitigate some of that. It just happened to be that we're moving the speaker post forward a bit closer to the building, so that helps in basically making that a little bit closer to the building as opposed to towards the north and the rear of the property. In addition to that, we've made an effort to keep as much of the existing landscaping to the rear of the property. You've got fully grown trees. These trees help absorb some of the sound.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
According to the information we had, it said that the speaker box will be pushed 10 feet to the north, which will be 10 feet closer to the single-family homes, not further.
I think if you go back to that aerial, the speaker post is facing north right now, I believe. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Alfred?
To the northwest, yeah.
Right. So we're moving the speaker post so that is actually facing west, and it should be essentially further south.
Charles, on, I think it's page 3 of 5 of the information we had, it indicates down toward the middle of the page that it's 10 feet closer.
That's correct. That if you look at this aerial, and I don't dispute the fact that currently the speaker's oriented north and the proposed one will be oriented west, but this is kind of the drive-through canopy for the ordering. I know it's hard to tell, but if you kind of look at it in this alignment, and then it's going to be in this general area. So
that's the window location,
That's the
Charles.
That's the window, not the speaker.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So is this where the speaker is?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And
yeah, it's hard to see on here.
Charles, can you go back to the other photo? All right. See where the curve is, where the cars are kind of curving around?
Yes.
Can you go up to the top with the mouse? Yeah, right around there is where it currently is.
Correct.
Okay.
And now you're saying it's where this
It's-
arrow is down
Correct.
there, right?
It's going to be right there then.
Further down, according to them.
Although the, the drive-through is further north now. So if you look at, I know they're not the same scale,
Right, right.
but the drive-through is at this location and proposed it's up in this location.
Actual cars, the path of the cars is longer because we wanted to accommodate a better stack, right? So we're using the rear of the property to our advantage here. Also, in doing that, we're creating that curve back there. The area within that curve is part of our stormwater detention. So we're utilizing that area to be able to contain some of the stormwater. That stormwater detention area has a fence around it, which is also going to help just kind of buffer some of that that sound. So we're really trying to, kind of make a situation that was not the best when it was first built, but now with the ability to redevelop it, we're trying to make the situation better.
Okay. So, I mean, if it's all possible, I would encourage the, you, the petitioner, to maybe try to work with the owner of the property to see if he can create some kind of maybe additional fencing or something to prevent especially the headlights as they're coming down that drive aisle there, that as it makes the curve, because they would be facing into the backyards of those properties.
Yeah, what's not there now is shrubs and kind of low-lying trees, but as a part of our redevelopment and meeting the landscape ordinance, we've been able to do that. So,
But won't there still be lights coming as a car pulls in, and it'll be driving down that aisle on the right side of the diagram?
yeah, there's no opportunity to change that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying in the back, I don't know.
As you make the turn, and it would actually be facing the one gentleman that came, because he is to the north and west. We explained the fact that the landscaping and some of the changes with the landscaping will help do that.
Okay.
Kind of buffer some of the headlights. And also the trash enclosure in itself will help do that also. Because we've now moved the trash enclosure from being within the parking spaces to the east to now being in the northwest corner. So in itself, as a structure, 8 feet tall, it helps deflect some of the headlight nuisance.
There was some reference that was made, you're only open till 2 a.m., not 3 a.m., correct?
2 a.m., 3 a.m. on the weekends.
Because again, it didn't say that. The information we were given said 2 a.m. Friday and Saturday.
I think,
That must be outdated information. I'm not sure when it was provided to you.
right.
Change the hours of day.
Charles, can you address that?
I can only assume the information in the report was from the information that was provided as part of the application, but we can certainly double check that. I don't have the actual petition with me tonight.
Okay. Do we have an issue? I mean, is that something that's allowable within the code to do that?
Yes, we don't have restrictions on hours of operations for restaurants and fast food type restaurants.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Trustee Scaletta.
So how many garbage cans are currently in the parking lot?
If there's any in the parking lot, that's probably because they're too big to fit in the trash enclosure. So once this trash enclosure is built, that should have two bins, correct? 2 bins. One large bin for trash, and then another smaller bin in there. So they should all be enclosed now in a trash enclosure, as
Okay,
opposed to
you're-
anything in the lot.
Right, you're referring to dumpsters, correct?
Correct.
I'm referring to garbage cans.
Oh, actual garbage cans?
Correct.
Outside the,
Like in the
say-
parking lot.
Right, in the parking lot. Currently, there's none.
Okay. So when someone goes through the drive-through at 2 o'clock in the morning and they're finished with their garbage, where does that go?
Some cases on the ground.
Okay.
Come forward.
Somebody wanna come up?
If you're going to speak, you're going to have to come up.
Just give us your name if you would.
I'm Deborah, Director of Operations.
What's your last name?
Johns.
Okay.
So yeah, sometimes it goes on the ground, but that's an easy fix. We can place trash cans with the type of lid that they can easily reach in from their car. So that's an easy fix.
Okay, great. What do you think about 4, 5?
4? I don't know where we could fit 5, but I can certainly try.
I'm looking at it, trying to figure out. You have no garbage cans now.
Yeah, and
So-
we can certainly fit 4. That's
Okay.
easy.
Sounds good. And so, Charles, the fences, the fence that's along the drive aisle in the rear, those are individual fences by the homeowners?
We'd have to do some research to find out, pulling permits and going out and observing, but I don't think it's one long fence that's owned by the grocer to the east, but it's possible. We'd have to do some research on that.
Okay. And there were some comments in the plan commission regarding that rear drive aisle. If I'm not mistaken, that rear drive aisle has been repaired, if not completely torn up and replaced in the past couple of years.
It has been improved. There used to be speed bumps along there that were removed.
Potholes
and things of that nature.
Okay. And also for the petitioner, Ms. Johns, so what is the practice or the policy for people congregating in the parking lot late at night with music playing?
We don't encourage our staff to go out after dark to disrupt anybody. We ask them to call local authorities, to call the police. We don't want to put our team in harm's way. We certainly discourage it.
Okay. And that's great. I mean, that's what they should do. I agree with you. You wouldn't want
Yeah,
a
to
young
sit-
person
yeah.
walking out into the parking lot and confronting a group of maybe like 10. So the policy is that they should contact the police.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. And when you say you discourage it, how do you discourage it?
It's policy. I mean, they sign it as a new hire that they will not ever go after a customer, follow somebody outside, go outside and confront anybody. So there's a whole set of training courses that each team member completes in their first 30 to 60 days of employment, so they won't put themselves in harm's way.
I apologize, that wasn't clear.
Okay.
I wanted to know, how do you discourage the customers from
Oh.
congregating in the parking lot?
Calling the police.
Okay. Do you have any signage that?
No, but that's, again, that's something that can be fixed. Christy, do you have a sign? No. Yeah, that's something that we can put up.
Okay. I mean, what we want to do is we want to find a way for you to be able to have a new building, but at the same time be a good neighbor as you're right next to residential.
And we want to be a good neighbor, so.
Okay.
And putting up signs, trash cans, whatever we have to do to make it easier for the people around us, we're more than committed.
Great. I appreciate you coming forward and being cooperative, and I hope that when staff contacts you in the future with an issue, that you're just as cooperative.
Absolutely. I've not been contacted in the past about any issues, but if ever I am, I'll do my best to make sure it gets taken care of.
Fantastic. Do you have a business card?
No, I don't. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Could you give your information to Charles just so he has everything?
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have no other questions.
Other questions from the board? Is there anything from the audience on this agenda item? Seeing none, we have a unanimous recommendation from the Plan Commission. What's the will of the board?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve from Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item under new business is the Napleton Repair Facility to be located at 3650 North Wilkie Road. This is a request for rezoning from M1 Research Development and Light Manufacturing District to B3 General Service Wholesale and Motor Vehicle District and assorted variations. So would you, petitioners present, would you just introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, members of the board. My name is June Park. I'm Assistant General Counsel with Napleton Automotive Group.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. You are correct. We are seeking a rezoning from M3 to, or M1 to a B3 light automotive repair shop. We are also seeking 3 variances as part of that request. By way of some background, the property as it currently sits used to be the home of Suburban Press. I understand that to be a now defunct weekly news publication of some sort, but they had offices and printing capabilities on site. Napleton purchased the building and that area there, I believe, 2 years ago, and it's been sitting vacant since. And we are trying to turn that building into a repair facility to help ease the congestion of our repair work at the Arlington Heights CDJR Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram dealership on Dundee Road. So, let's see. There are 3 variations that we are requesting. I'll go through them each really quickly. The first one is a request for a variation in the requirement of having 4-inch shade trees within certain parking lot locations. Again, by way of some background, cars and trees don't get along, and an automobile repair facility wants to get rid of as many trees on its property as possible. And the reason for that is not because that we have any animosity toward trees. We love trees, but trees attract animals. Trees tend to fall over in bad weather. They present obstacles when you're backing cars in and out. So our preference is to have as few trees as possible. According to the zoning requirements, there are 11 trees required in those 11 locations as presented in this slide. What Napleton is requesting is to have only 5 trees in the locations where those red dots are identified. And the reasoning is, and this slide is a comparison of where the trees we are requesting is, and the empty hollow circles are the ones that we are seeking to be omitted in the variation that we are requesting here. And the reason is that the trees on the outside that we would like to maintain, those are the most visible. They maintain the character of the area. They're along the public ways, Wilkie on the east and Frontage Road, I believe that's, I can't remember what that road is on the west. Is that 53 on the west?
It's 53, Route 53 on the west,
Oh, thank you.
Wilkie Road on the east.
Right. Thank you very much, Charles. The second reason is that the internal trees do not impact the aesthetics of the area at all, but they do present obstacles for operation of a car automobile repair facility. And the reasons that I mentioned before, they attract animals. Animals defecate, for lack of a better word. They're not good for maintaining cars on the property. There's one tree that is required per the zoning ordinance to be where we would like to put the detention basin. So we are just seeking that that tree be omitted. So our request here is to have 5 trees instead of the required 11, and in those locations outlined by the red dot. The second variation is to have 12-inch plant screen along the public ways instead of 36 inches. And the request here is because if the zoning requirement is to maintain the aesthetics of the area, it requires us to maintain a 12-inch screen of plant material along public ways because that's what the property to our immediate east and southeast is currently using. That is Lexus of Arlington Heights. Excuse me. That's Bob Rohrman's Lexus of Arlington. And as you can see, there's some trees or some shrubbery all along Wilkie Road. There's a little bit better close-up view of those shrubs. We measured it. That's not a good picture, but that's 16 inches. We're seeking 12, but if this board and the Planning Commission would stipulate to 16, we would be willing to have a 16-inch screen. Now, that is also directly east of the proposed Napleton site, and that is also Bob Rohrman's Lexus of Arlington Heights. And as you can see, there are no automobiles being displayed there, and yet they are still maintaining a 16-inch high shrubbery screen instead of the required 36. That's a close-up of their shrubbery. And then another close-up of the shrubbery. Some are better than others, so their shrubs aren't really all that great, consistently. But as mentioned, if the zoning requirement is for the aesthetics and the local character to be maintained, then it would seem logical for Napleton to be allowed to have a 12-inch screen instead of a 36-inch screen. And that would maintain the look and feel of the entire area. It would be consistent. It is our contention that having the same size shrubbery on both sides of Wilkie would just make the area look better than having what would be perceived to be a mishmash of heights and shrubbery between one side of Wilkie and the other. The third variation that we are requesting is for a waiver of the traffic study. We discussed this with the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has graciously approved this variation, and we, of course, concede and accept their gracious approval, and we stand by their approval. We understand that there are two conditions. The outdoor storage of automobiles receiving any major automobile repair which shall be prohibited, and the petitioner shall comply with all federal, state, village codes, regulations, policies. Napleton's intention is to do both of those. We acknowledge these conditions, and we wholeheartedly intend to comply. And that's the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I'll just go back and use a couple of the pictures that the petitioner has. So just to clarify, the board has approved variations for both Rohrman and Napleton. That was for the screening in front of their vehicle sales areas, because that's the product that they're selling. And the variation for Rohrman and Napleton was along Dundee Road, and for Rohrman along Dundee and Wilkie Road. It was not a variation from the screening along Kennicott, or for their storage areas in the back, or for the storage area that Napleton has on Shore Drive, or for the Arlington Ford storage facility on University Drive. And the actual variation was to reduce the screening from 36 inches to 18 inches, not 12 inches. As you can see from this slide, Rohrman has lots of trees in the islands, so they actually added extra trees in some areas here as opposed to in the landscape areas. But they've got trees, they've got islands here, trees, 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 trees. So they installed all the trees as were required, and the only variation to the screening was along Dundee Road and Wilkie Road. So staff would recommend approval of the rezoning to B3. We feel that's appropriate. We feel that there are many qualities for providing the landscaping, not just aesthetic or environmental, but also making our community be the best that it can. It would set a precedent for other repair facilities, other retail shopping centers that would like to not provide the screening so customers can see their storefronts, things of that nature. So we would recommend requiring the screening in this particular situation. I'll go through a couple other slides very quickly. So this is the area to the north. It's a very nice industrial area, very well landscaped. This is Napleton. They have been parking vehicles there. What they do is they park large trucks, so even a 36-inch screen, those trucks would still be visible, but at least it would be more aesthetically pleasing. So with that, Plan Commission and staff recommended approval of the rezoning, but denial of the two landscape variation requests. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Charles. Let me just ask this one question. If we were require 36-inch landscaping bushes, does that mean 36 inches when they're put in, or ultimately when they grow to 36 inches? Do we give them like a grace period while they're growing?
Typically, they're purchased pretty close to 36 inches when they're planted. I mean, some might be 30, some might be 38, but, you know, typically if they specify in their landscape plan a 36-inch, screening landscape material. They're typically planted close to that.
Okay, thank you. Sir, can you just give us the nature of the repairs that will be going on in this new building?
Yeah, they will be light automotive repairs. There won't be any heavy collision repair. There's not a body shop. There's no body shop capability on that site. There won't be any major damaged vehicles being repaired there. Now, that's not to say that some cars that were brought in for repair may have some body work pre-existing when they brought it in, let's say for an engine repair. So we can't guarantee that none of the cars will have, will not have any body work or dents and collisions and scratches. But the site itself will not do any heavy automotive or any collision body work. It's not equipped for that. It will do light automobile repair, oil changes, new car prep, things of that nature, to ease the congestion at our dealership on Dundee.
So there may be cars that are stored outside of the actual building while they're awaiting repair overnight?
Correct, and also awaiting for pickup. Once the repairs are completed, we move them out of the storage bays, and then we have to have a porter come and take it to the actual dealership location. It will not be a facility where the customer can come and pick it up or drop off the car directly. They go to the CDJR dealership on Dundee, and then a porter will take that vehicle over to the Wilkie Road location. But to answer your specific question, that is correct. Some cars may be not brand new cars. Some cars may be older cars that a customer would just like repaired. And if it's waiting for parts, it would be parked outside. It would be parked inside if there's a bay available, of course, but our anticipated use is that there will be some cars parked outside, awaiting repair or awaiting delivery following repair.
Okay. Questions from the board? Trustee Rosenberg.
So is the policy of the dealership to typically wash a car after it's been repaired?
Yes, it is. I say that depending on what the weather is. I tried to get my car washed the other day, but it's too cold, so the bristles will be frozen, so they won't do it if it's too cold. But the policy is to wash cars after repair. And in fact, this facility that we are proposing, we would like to have bays specifically designed for washing a vehicle after repair.
Okay, so that being the case, you typically wouldn't have a bird or issue defecating, so to say, on your car in the wintertime.
I can't say.
More than likely.
More than likely, there might be a recalcitrant squirrel, but and after the car is washed, and if we have to store it outside, it's open to the elements and the animals and the wind and the weather.
But, I mean, from my experience in the past, typically the car isn't washed till the customer is almost there, or even sometimes right before they get there, so.
Depending on the nature of the repairs, that is correct.
So, I mean, I agree with the staff recommendation as far as, because I think the aesthetics there don't look very good from the standpoint of not having any landscaping at all, pretty much, and just a bare building as opposed to all the areas to the north of there, and even the few trees that Rohrman has across the street, I think do add a value to it, and so I think it's important that you have it. I mean, I understand your point of view, but I'm not sure it's proven per se. But
if I may clarify,
sure.
We have no problem with the trees or the shrubbery screen. Our position with regard to the shrubbery screen is that it be consistent with Rohrman's. Theirs is 16 inches. We wish ours to be 16 inches. With regard to the trees, your point is well taken. We would like 5. The code requires 11.
So I mean, I think that the concept is, you probably heard this already, was with Rohrman, they were actually, the reason I think for the lower landscaping was because they were actually showing the cars there on site, where in your case, the cars aren't really being shown there. It's more of a repair facility, as you say. And so I think customers, I don't think you'll see any customers per se, as opposed to theirs is the actual sales site itself.
Right. To that point, we are not displaying vehicles for sale. That is true, and you are accurate there. But we do have cars, and if some passerby were to look at a brand-new 2018 Dodge sitting at that location, they might go to our CDJR location down the street and say, hey, I just saw a CD or a new Dodge Charger. It looked really great. So although our intended purpose is not to display new vehicles for sale, we are intending to show vehicles by the mere circumstance of the location and what we intend to do. And we don't want to impede that if there is a benefit to be had from that.
Okay.
I know, you got me laughing.
Trustee Scaletta.
All right. So, Charles, do we have like a landscape plan for the for the overall property?
Yes, this plan highlights the areas that they would like to have 1 foot tall perimeter landscaping. And then this area shows, so this shows the original landscape plan showed trees in a different location, here, 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 and down here, which are different than what the petitioner just presented tonight. And then these red circles are the ones that are missing. So this plan shows all of the trees that are required by code and where all the perimeter landscaping would be. The other point to address Trustee Rosenberg's question, if I can just answer while I'm at it, the areas east for Rawman, there were going to be 2 other car dealers there, and that was why it had a lower requirement approved by the board, because there were supposed to be 2 additional dealers there. They haven't built them yet.
Sure. No, and that's why Napleton has them on their property as
Correct.
well.
Correct.
So we're being consistent. This is completely different than a dealership. So the only people that'll be on property for the most part are going to be employees of Napleton, correct?
Correct, and we anticipate 12 to 14 employees at the site.
And there'll be no signage there that it's Napleton?
My understanding is no signage, no banners, no nothing to elicit a sales type of a situation, but there would be a sign that says it's part of Napleton. I believe there will be a signage with regard to it being a Napleton facility.
What would it say?
Napleton Automotive Group, perhaps. I know that we intend to put a sign. I believe we intend to put a sign where the current Suburban Press sign is. It's along the north entryway.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with your logic of people seeing vehicles, it would be the same as if somebody was driving through a shopping center, right?
Correct.
If you see a vehicle, you would think to yourself, that looks pretty nice. I think I should go look at one.
Correct.
Okay. Right next to Courtyard by Marriott, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's cars in there all the time.
Yep.
Hopefully there's a bunch of vehicles that Napleton sells in that parking lot.
Correct.
I mean, it just does not really have, I don't know. I know you're trying really, really hard on behalf of Napleton, but all of your reasons are really kind of falling on deaf ears, at least for me.
Sure.
I'm having a very difficult time. I can appreciate if this was a sales center, which it's not. You know, we're a village that has many, many trees. And if residents came and said they wanted to take down their Parkway tree because birds fly in there and sometimes they defecate on their car, we wouldn't be having it. So, and there's trees all over around your dealership and around all the other dealerships. So I'm supportive of the Plan Commission recommendation and would move approval.
There a
In
second?
concurrence of the Plan Commission recommendation.
All right, there's a motion to concur with the Plan Commission recommendation by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Tinaglia. First, Trustee LaBedz, then Trustee Glasgow.
Thank you. I, too, have listened to what you've said. I read the Plan Commission minutes and your arguments for it. And one of the points you were bringing up, because your concern about the trees is that, well, trees blow over in storms and so on. But I would hope that you would be maintaining your trees so that the likelihood of that happening would be slim to none. You know, if you know, having this facility and it's obvious that you have pride in it, it seemed to me you would be concerned about making sure the trees are well maintained, which is another reason that I have a hard time disagreeing with the Plan Commission's recommendation to deny the, having all the trees. I do think the aesthetics are important, and I don't see why you wouldn't even want to be better than the person next door. So that's why I have a hard time with the arguments that you provide.
Thank you, Trustee.
Trustee Glasgow.
I have to concur with the comments that have already been said, just so you understand. The trees themselves, I really looked for some kind of hardship here, and I really couldn't find one. And especially where you're going to be putting the trees, you know, the nature of this facility, I'm just having problems, and I want to make sure that there is heat dissipation there. I like the fact that it breaks up corporate areas and ends up giving a different view. And, you know, it ends up assisting just overall with the beauty of the neighborhood, not to mention the drainage, the stormwater, everything else. So unless you've got some other card up your sleeve, I'm going to have to vote with the Plan Commission on this one.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a good presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. Two comments. One comment that you made was that the plan for the trees would make it difficult to maneuver vehicles through the parking lot. I would hope that would not be the case, since the trees are in the grass, and it looks, I'm looking at a Google Earth map, it looks like there are curbs around the parking lot. Is that true, or is that not true?
I don't know what version of Google image you're looking at, but
Well,
there
this
is going to be
recent.
some. There's going to be some modifications to what is on Google. I do know that when I looked at Google recently, it didn't correlate with the ultimate site plan that we have.
Okay, well, regardless, hopefully you're not taking these new vehicles, these repaired vehicles off-road.
Right.
So, you know, I'm finding it difficult to buy the maneuvering issue. The other thing is that, you know, I'm looking at this picture, and the picture that we had in our packet showed an empty parking lot. The picture that I'm looking at, the new cars, the cars that you would want to display, are in the back. And all the vehicles that are in the front are employee vehicles. So I have trouble buying the shorter screen shrubs around the perimeter of the building when the vehicles that you want to display would be in the back.
That's well taken. I don't know what image you're looking at, so I can't speak to it.
It's the most recent Google Earth map.
Yeah, I just don't recall what that image looks like, but thank you very much.
Trustee Sidor.
Just a quick question. So this is, you said you'd be doing oil changes and light repair or light maintenance.
Correct.
So will customers bring their car to this location at all, or will it all be dropped off at the main dealership and then you're going to have a porter take it across and bring it back?
The
Is that
latter.
correct? So
The
no
latter.
customers are going to be coming in here. There's no waiting room or anything like that?
No waiting room, no customers should be at that site. It'll all be porters from our CDJR location on Dundee.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
If nothing further from the board, anything from the audience on this? Seeing none, what's the will of the board? Do we have a motion?
We have a motion?
A concurrent recommendation.
Okay, we do. That was by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Tinaglia. All right, if no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well,
Great, thank you.
congratulations on
Thank you.
part of it at least.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And last item under new business is a request for sign code modifications. Mr. Recklass?
I'm going to let Mr. Perkins introduce this one.
Okay.
Thank you. What you have before you are a series of small changes to the sign code, some requested by Design Commission, some identified by staff. Essentially, some of the changes are making the sign code more flexible, less restrictive. One of the changes is to try to reflect and more accurately portray how staff has interpreted certain provisions. And then the last two sets of changes were requested by the Design Commission based on their concern over some poor aesthetics in some things that have been done primarily in perimeter windows and window displays. I'd like Steve Heitzinger, who's a design planner, to quickly walk through these changes. He's been working on this with the Design Commission, and then both Steve and I are available for questions afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, so jumping right in, first topic is residential wall signs. And what this is regarding is residential zoning district, just to be clear. It's not for residential buildings. It's for churches, schools, and parks that would be located in a residential neighborhood. And the issue is that currently only ground signs are allowed for those types of businesses, for those types of entities. But all the schools already have wall signs. Many of the churches and parks also have wall signs, and we think they should be allowed to have some wall signs. So here's some examples. There's a church, a school, park building, and there's numerous examples, and we surveyed all of them throughout Arlington Heights. One common characteristic, or two common characteristics between all these signs, is that they're all installed with separate individual letters, which we think is a really nice way to do this type of signage. You know, when you're putting up, you know, a significantly large sign in the middle of a residential neighborhood, to do individual letters like this is a nice, tasteful way of not disrupting the neighborhood or being, you know, visually offensive in any way. They're also, none of them are internally illuminated. And again, this is by choice. All of these existing signs existed without permits. You know, schools put up signs and did things for many years without zoning involvement. So that's why they all have signs already. We're wanting to allow signs, and that many of these will become legal then. But again, by their own will, they've put up individual letters and no internal illumination. So we think that would be a good way to go forward. You know, one option is to make no changes to code if the board feels that wall signs are not appropriate. But the recommendation of staff and the design commission is to amend the code to allow signs for these types of uses. They would not exceed 25% of the wall area, or 45 square feet, and that's based on the survey that we did. We kind of looked at all the different signs, and there were some bigger ones and there's some littler ones, but the 45 square feet felt about right. One wall sign will be allowed per street frontage, and then the other unique thing here is that, you know, the main entrance for these types of entities doesn't always face the street. So we do think there'll be cases such as Olympic Pool, for example. The new main entrance is going to be facing the parking area on the other side of the building, and they want to have a sign next to that. Schools are very similar, churches, same thing. So allowing a sign at a main entrance that does not have street frontage, we also think is appropriate, although we're recommending a limitation of that to only 20 square feet. The signs would be required to be designed to complement the architecture. Again, we're recommending the individual letters. It could have a logo or an emblem along with it. Internal illumination would be prohibited, and the design commission added a recommendation to limit the maximum for any property to a total of 3 signs. This is the specific language that would be going in the code. If there's any questions about that, we can review it at the end, but otherwise I'm just going to move along to the next topic.
Well, before you move on, should we
Okay.
take these individually like the plan commission did, each one motion per?
I think that that's probably wise, because in some instances it's design commission recommendations, in some instances it's more than that, and you may not feel you want all of it.
It'll be easier to discuss it that
So I
way.
think,
Yeah, so why don't we discuss this one and make a motion on this one?
that makes more sense.
Yeah. Questions on this one from the board? Any issues? Trustee Scaletta?
Just a quick question. So like any other sign, code, or any code that we have for signage currently, if there was a situation where someone felt that they needed a variation, they'd still be able to apply for one, correct?
Yes, of course.
I have no problems with this.
All right, Trustee Tinaglia.
Steve, on the internal illumination, how will we respond to a petition that comes in where it has the halo backlit lighting, where the letters are not illuminated, but there is a light that makes them glow like a shadow? What would you classify that as?
We would classify that as still being internal illumination, so that would not be allowed. If it was appropriate, they would have the opportunity to request a variation for that.
So in a park district building that's going to be open in the evening or whatever, you know, in the winter like now when it gets dark so early and folks still use these main entrances and things, what will be the preferred method of illuminating these signs?
I mean, they would have to just externally illuminate them by shining like a spotlight onto the sign, which is a much more subtle way than when it emits light. So you know, the way they would light up their entrance or any other portions of their site, they could do external illumination on on those signs. But to keep it subtle and tasteful, we're recommending not having any type of internal illumination.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Trustee Sidor.
Steve, I just have to disagree with you on your last comment, because Jim, what did you call when it's behind it? What's it called, halo lighting?
Yes, it's a backlighting.
That's pretty classy. I mean, it's very subtle and it's low. It appeared, the ones that I've seen have appeared quite, tasteful, versus blasting a spotlight on whatever it is from the outside. So I respectfully disagree that your recommendation is more subtle and nicer looking than just having those nice halo lights. I thought when you were talking about internal lighting, and I'm glad Trustee Tinaglia asked the question, I thought you meant something like like a sign that was internally illuminated and opaque and would emit light. But that's not emitting light past the sign. It's just kind of putting light around the background. Correct?
Correct. I mean, I agree. It's definitely more subtle than a typical commercial sign that would have an acrylic face and it shines through that. Having the halo lit is more subtle and tasteful. I definitely agree, but I guess we're just being conservative and recommending no type of internal illumination. And from our survey of all the signs that are existing out there, we haven't observed anybody who's used that type of lighting, so I don't know that there'll be a demand for it. I mean, we can start with this, and then if there's issues, we always have the opportunity to amend code again. But to kind of start, being a little more restrictive would be our recommendation. And of course, the variation process is there as well.
I don't know. I guess it's a matter of, taste at this point, or preference. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. So we were talking before about these are churches and schools and park district buildings. Are we talking about any other kinds of facilities? Were they, I mean, you've got South Middle School and a church. Are there other types of buildings that are included in this?
There really isn't. In a residential zoning district, the only non-residential types of uses that are allowed are the churches, schools, and park facilities.
Okay.
I mean, there's the library. That's kind of a unique entity, and they already have sign variations for the signage that they have.
Right. So where I'm going with this is dovetailing on what Trustee Sidor was saying. These buildings also have parking lots that have lamps. They have street lamps in them, right? So if the sign is backlit, I don't see how that's going to be adding to an already existing light issue.
I mean, the halo option is certainly something that could be incorporated if that's the will of the board.
Trustee Tinaglia.
And so everybody that's spoken so far is dead on with the whole point here. It's just, it's a lot more expensive to put. That's why you don't see them in a lot of these, because instead of having just a spotlight shining on it, you have all these individual lights with individual transformers, and it's a little more expensive to build them. It is a very soft, very classy way to light up a sign. What you see are the shadows of the letters as opposed to a blatant spotlight that shines and then reflects back off of that surface. So in my opinion, I think all three of these pictures that you have here would look great if they had the budget to be able to afford to backlight them. I don't think anyone would be offended by that at all, but that's just my opinion.
I would concur with that as well. Any other
Well,
questions?
Mayor, could we, or Robin, could we add the fact that, I don't know how you determine between, between internal lighting and the halo lighting effect? I don't know technically how you add that in to allow.
Definition, I don't consider what we've been discussing internal lighting, as you said.
I mean, either, so, okay.
And I
Definition.
yeah, and I think that that's actually essentially what that amounts to, is sort of direction, so that
Okay.
if somebody comes in with this halo effect that you're talking about, that is not considered internal illumination. And I think that was really the first question that you asked. And so I think the answer to that is no.
I mean, and I'm not debating it, but
So
to
it was
be
yes.
clear, each of the individual letters, it's on the back side. They're lined with the light. The light bulbs, if you will, are inside the letters, and that's why I would, if I was reviewing a permit for something like that, I would categorize that as internal illumination. So if if the board is wanting to incorporate the halo lighting as an option, I think we should just add that language to the recommended code.
Call it backlit and halo, or any combination of those
I think
words.
those are recognizable industry standard terms, so we can just add that.
My concern with doing that is that 6 months from now, they call them something else. So I don't know if there's a better way to define them. I don't know if I don't know how that impacts the whether internal illumination is really that big a concern at all. Whether we just do away with that distinction, which is the other possibility.
If I
Especially
could,
because you're talking individual letters.
if I could, I mean, internal to me means enclosed. You know, when you think of like a typical canned light where the lights are completely enclosed and the light is shining through, whereas this is external, it just is behind it versus it's not inside of any kind of can, correct?
Correct.
I mean, I guess I would agree with Robin. I think if it's the will of the board, we can just as staff kind of make that interpretation at this point. And this is always subject to change, and if there's new technology, we always can come back to review it. But I mean, I think we could probably be comfortable with that if that's the will of the board.
And the only issue with that is if I'm a petitioner and I don't see, and it says what it says now, I'm not going to be able to guide my client into choosing this more expensive, wonderful sign, or for fear we might have to go get a variation on it. I know what you're saying, and I'm sure you would react that way and review things that way, but I think you guys are clever enough, you can come up with some language to put it in there in a way that makes some sense, that any school district, library board, or park district personnel can understand that this kind of light, it can't be a forward-facing directional light. It has to be a rear-facing backlit halo light. Those are the words that are the buzzwords that make the difference. And I know that those are a lot of words, but
Well, and I think that, so I guess that we go back to it, and I assume that there's something else that is an internally lit individual letter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that would typically have, like I said, like an acrylic face, and the light would shine through that, just like right across the street where you have commercial properties. Think of Athletico. They've got their sign with the letters, and it shines out through the face, which is very typical for a commercial sign. And there's nothing wrong with that in a commercial zoning district, but in a neighborhood, that's what we were being sensitive about.
If I could, I mean, address Trustee Tinaglia's point. I mean, generally speaking, I think an applicant would be coming through an application process. Aside from just the code, there would be a form that they would be filling out, correct? And they'd be giving information on our code. I mean, that could be something that we can put whatever we want on our forms. I mean, is it typical that someone will come forward with a proposal without any consultation with planning staff?
Sure, if they're submitting a permit for a code compliant sign, those will just show up for review. And they're always going to come with detailed drawings, so we'll be able to tell whether or not it's shining through the face, or if it's a backlit halo type signage, or not lit at all.
I guess that's I was just trying to see if Trustee Tinaglia's suggestion that someone may just not even pursue it because they feel it isn't contemplated in the code. I'm just trying to get us.
Okay,
Perhaps
so
in the
what-
second to last sentence where it talks about external illumination, we can kind of describe what external illumination would
Definition.
include.
Okay, what we can do is add after that sentence, for purposes of this section, backlit or halo-type lighting is not considered internal illumination.
I knew you guys could figure it out.
All right, Trustee Scaletta.
I agree. We can't leave it up to interpretation because, no offense, this is what happened. You know what I mean? And isn't the whole point of us going through this right now to clarify?
Yes.
Great. We just did it.
We'll add that sentence will go after the internal illumination is, but external is permitted. We'll add that sentence.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right, Trustee LaBedz.
All right, so it seems clear to me, but didn't you just say that
Good one,
the
Robin.
light bulbs were inside the letters?
Well, they are, so the letters are solid with like a hollow back side, right? So then imagine that mounted against the solid wall when those lights come on, they're not gonna shine through the face because it's like a solid metal letter. They'll shine back against the wall, and the wall becomes this kind of halo of light, and you actually, the letters will just appear black then at night, because they're backlit. So yeah, that's good
Right,
point.
I'm understanding what you describe, and I'm not disagreeing with my colleagues about the tastefulness of it at all. It's just that I'm looking to make sure that we don't then have someone come in saying, but that's internal, so why is my internal lighting? So I guess if the language that you're proposing, Robin, is clear enough to everyone who would come through, then
Well, what it is we are deciding that those are not going to be internal illumination. I'm not saying they aren't.
Okay.
I'm saying that the will of the village board is that those lights are not, that type of lighting is not considered to be internal illumination lighting.
okay, so and
We're,
so
we're
this way-
defining it a certain way.
all right, so that it will be clear.
Yes.
I just want to make sure
I think
that.
it's
Yeah,
pretty
I'm
clear.
confident that every sign contractor out there knows the difference. I don't think it's gonna become a gray area that's gonna be debatable. You know, if we say backlit halo, it's done. They'll
Okay.
understand that.
Okay, then I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything from the audience on this item? Mary Beth, come forward.
Sorry, in the age of smartphones, I couldn't help but Google
Give
what
us
we're
your name
talking
again
about.
for the record.
Yeah, it's Mary Beth Canty, 612 East Euclid. So the backlit lighting that you're talking about, it's also referred to as reverse channel, where the light shines behind and it's actually reversed to shine between the sign and the substrate. Just if we're looking for clarity, reverse channel might be,
Use both.
yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, if nothing further from the audience, do we have a motion to approve the modified?
Well, this, as it's proposed here, because this is more than the design commission proposed as well. So it's this language with this additional sentence.
We have a motion
So,
to that effect?
so moved.
By trustee Scaletta, seconded by trustee Sidor. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next, Steve.
Okay. Next topic is awning signage. And the background here is that if somebody wants to put signage on their awning, code currently allows up to 20% of the awning surface area to be signage, and that can be dispersed in whatever way they want to do it. But code goes on to say that of that 20%, only 25% of that can be a logo. So you've got an awning this big, you're allowed to have signage this big, and it says you can only have a logo that big. We think that's kind of silly, and it's caused problems for some of our businesses in the past. You know, here's an example of awnings that just have logos on them. And, you know, in our opinion, and in the design commission agreed, that if somebody wants to use just a logo as the signage on their awning, they should be able to use the full 20% of the signable area as a logo. If they don't want to put their name on there, because they're recognized by their brand of their logo, that should be okay. So in simple terms, we're just looking to omit that section of the code that says only 25% can be a logo. It's like a restriction that we feel is unnecessary, okay? And in addition to that, in the downtown, awning signage is only allowed to include the name, address, or logo of the business. Okay, and some businesses have preferred to include additional information such as products sold or services rendered. And here's some examples of that existing in our downtown. Tatawa has dine-in, takeout catering. La Tosca includes sangria, private rooms. So they elected to put some additional information aside from code technically only allows the name, logo, or what did I say? Name, and address, thank you. Name, address, or logo of the business. So having these was, you know, how these came about. I think Tatawa's has been there a long time. But our feeling was that that's another change that we could make to allow more flexibility for businesses and allow that type of signage to be on awnings if the businesses would like to do that. However, when we reviewed this with the Design Commission, they did not agree with that recommendation. So it's the Design Commission's recommendation to not allow the additional information on the sign besides the name, logo, or address. They think it's a nicer look to just keep the names and the logos and not get into all the extra information on there. They did, however, support the omitting that restriction on the size of the logo. So, again, the recommendation is to omit that 25% restriction on logos, but the Design Commission did not recommend adding the other pertinent information to the awnings. This is the specific language, which the green was the language that we were recommending adding. It's now shown as a strikeout because the Design Commission did not concur with that. But you can see the other portions that are struck out, which is the 25% limitation on logos. And that's it. If there's any questions on that?
Question Trustee Sidor.
I disagree with the sign commission, or the design commission. I agree with you this time, Steve.
Okay.
I think that we should allow these additional, whether it's the products or services sold within reason. Because, I mean, how many times have you been in a downtown area and you look across the street and that business has one chance to capture your attention, probably 3 or 4 seconds, unless you walk across the street and actually inquire to know what they might offer. I was in Sonoma. Let me tell you a story. Can I tell a story, Tom? I was in Sonoma, and I don't drink wine, as Randy knows, and I was trying to find some place that might serve a spirit. And there was a canopy sign about 2 blocks away, and I could see the guy said, it said bourbon, spirits, classic cocktails. If that wasn't there, I never would have walked into the restaurant, and they never would have got my business. And I think it's just this additional information that customers should be able to quickly, discern what that, within reason, again, tastefully, what that establishment provides. So I like the fact that you're changing that 25% thing and the logo thing. I know that was an issue with Pure Salon and others. But this second part, I agree with you and disagree with the Design Commission on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Trustee Scaletta.
So I agree with Trustee Sidor. I think that part of, the products that they produce or services that they sell is part of their brand. And I think that that's important for them to be able to kind of brand themselves and try to identify who they are and what they do. The one concern I have with the logos, and I'm the guy that's always voting for these sign variations, so I don't know why I'm saying this, but go back to the photograph of all the logos on the awnings. Okay. So I start to question, if somebody has, let's use Peggy's as an example. Let's say that they put awnings over all the windows on Campbell or even all on Vale, and you have logo after logo after logo after logo, and then they got a big sign up there that also is advertising their business, and that just seems to be a bit much. And I don't know how you write a code for this, but I would rather see that they find a way that they're using their awnings to kind of brand who they are, live entertainment, Fresh Food Daily, and I just start to wonder if we over commercialize by just repeated logos. That's just my biggest concern, is that when you have somebody who has so many windows and or multiple storefronts, is how we, you say, okay, you can do it, and then all of a sudden we look at it and we're like, oh my gosh, we've just completely, we have a very charming downtown, and now all of a sudden it's become completely commercialized to the point where it's gaudy. To use a Helen Jensen word. Really.
Trustee Sidor.
Just, doesn't Carlos facing Harmony Park have some kind of, family crest or something on each one of his awnings facing Harmony Park over his windows? I think he does. And I don't know that it ever, made me, I understand what you're saying, John, but I don't know that ever made me, I don't know if it's 2 or 3, that Carlos have, facing Harmony Park, where we put thousands of people on Thursdays and Fridays and in the summertime, and it wasn't an issue for me that I think when I think about it. But I can understand if you had 12 windows, and you got 12 logos. I don't know.
But can I just
sure.
talk to you for a second? So when you go to the Latasca one, where and maybe it's just that's tasteful, the way that it's their logo, and how do you say, if your logo is tasteful? But when you look at, go back to the other one, there's one there that's kind of like in blue, and, I think that, that if you kept seeing that, over all their windows around their entire little building over here, that might seem like a bit much. So I'm not sure what the answer is on this one.
Well,
I
one thing
think
that I
there's-
could offer, sorry for the interruption, for signage in the downtown, we do a design review. So for every new sign in the downtown, they submit a design commission application to the planning department for review. And we generally administratively approve probably 90% of those. Take a quick look, it looks nice, it fits in, there's no concerns, and we move it along. Every now and then, there's something that somebody proposes that we have some hesitation with, so then we defer that to the design commission. So if a situation came up like you're suggesting, that somebody was looking to really just go a little bit over the top with the logos, we could kind of, first of all, we would have the opportunity to make recommendations like you had said and encourage them, maybe you want to break that up, a couple logos, a couple of the name, maybe include some additional information, see if they're willing to take those suggestions or not, or if they really feel adamant about it and we're still concerned, we can bring it to the design commission and let them review it. If in the end it gets approved, but just so there is a design review process involved.
Okay.
Trustee Tinaglia.
So Steve, if we can go back to the other photograph, please. The logo discussion, all good with it? I know you guys will handle the monotony of it all if it gets out of line or too many in a row. How does this language about catering, carry-out, sangria, sushi, coffee, whatever someone wants to advertise on it, are we going to limit that as these show here to only on the valances? Or are we saying that those types of identifiers can be on the main awning as well?
We're not being specific about where that information would go. You're right, these two examples happen to have them similar down on the valance, but we were not getting that specific about the location. So I guess, promoting some flexibility and creativity, and then again, if
Can you think of examples where it would be appropriate to, have carry out or dine in or sangria up on the main part of the awning? I mean, I'm on board for the logo up there, even if there's 5 in a row. I think, La Tosca's is a great example of that. It's fine. I'm not so sure I want to see sangria in big letters up on the main part of the awning. I think having it in that valance area to me is more appropriate, like they've done. Maybe I'm the only one, but that's
I agree with that.
I agree with you on that.
I do think most of the ones we've seen have been on the valance. I'm trying to think of one on the main part of the awning.
I don't think I've seen them. I just want to make sure that, not everybody, not everybody is a designer, and not everybody who owns a building or a restaurant has the capability of making, great design decisions. So, and they often don't necessarily consult with with other great sellers of these things. So,
Mr. Eckles.
I guess, could we say, though, that given the administrative review process that we have and the fact that if it doesn't pass staff, it would go to the design commission, I mean, could we be open to the possibility that someone may come up with something that would be appropriate to the board and to the design commission to put it outside of the balance that we just aren't contemplating? Is there harm in allowing it in this manner, but with the understanding that, if it doesn't meet the taste test, it can be caught by staff and by design commission?
I'm going to be, completely transparent here. I'm trying to be respectful for the design commission's perspective on this as well. And the fact that I see where they're coming from. They did not want to have the clutter of all of this stuff on these things. Awnings are not signs. Awnings are architectural components of a building. They're there to prevent light from coming in and glare for their patrons inside. We're using it as another alternative method for signage, which is great, and it's fine, and we should be doing that. But again, tasteful, in my opinion, is what it should be. And on the valances, to me, that's fine. on the top, I'm not on board.
Trustee Glasgow.
Mr. Reckles, I hear what you're saying. I've been listening intently, and part of what I'm concerned about is beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And if we make hard and rigid rules, I think we may end up excluding something that would work. And I don't want to be so close-minded as to not have something here that would benefit a business like Trustee Sidor said. So, that being said, is there some way we can craft this so that we end up allowing staff to have the majority of these and then others go to design commission? Is the board open to that? Or are we just going to try and craft something that is black letter law that, you know, every person has to follow and it's not flexible?
That's how it would proceed now, is staff reviews them first, determines whether they're comfortable that they meet the intent of the code. And if they do, then you administratively approve them. If not, or if you have some concerns, then you send them to design commission, right?
Right. I mean, we're reviewing them for code compliance, but again, in the downtown, we're also looking at them from an aesthetic point of view
Right.
and considering the surroundings around that particular sign.
To answer
Part of the discussion that we have for these minutes, and the reason we have minutes is so we can go back and look and see what the board felt at the time. Have we run across anything in the past where you just administratively said, no way, went to design commission and then, you know, came to us for whatever reason? Using it as an alternative for signs, I think is something that I'm not really for. I don't want to have it as signage per se, but having it as identifier is something completely different.
I'm not sure that
Do you
I
recall
followed that,
anything that came before you but in the past where, you know, you're going to kick it over to design commission and it came to the board? Because I don't recall anything.
Oh, those wouldn't necessarily come to the board because I was referring to more of a code compliant, like all variations
I
come to
get
the
it,
board.
but just in the past, and I don't mean to cut you off, I just don't want to go down the rabbit hole. Have we ever had anything come to us along these lines, ever
Sure.
in the past?
Sure. I'll give you one really good example.
Okay.
The Tuller's corner sign that became the big giant blade sign at the corner of Vale.
No, I'm talking about more like an awning type
An
thing.
awning wise?
Yeah, because I don't recall one. The blade signs I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that was an issue.
that was a big one.
Because right now, that stuff is not permitted on awnings.
Yeah,
Right now, we're pretty restrictive in terms of what is permitted on awnings.
You Trustee Tinaglia, you go to all these other villages. What do you see in other villages?
It's always just a balance. What we're going to offer tonight, it sounds like anyway, is that the logos and things can be up there, but I have yet to see one anywhere that it has something that their wares, or that they're selling, you know, sausages or what have you, up on the main area
Well,
up
if you
there.
think about it, it doesn't serve as much of a purpose because when it's down on the valance, that's sort of forward-facing.
That's where you
Yeah.
see it.
So that's where you see it. So it doesn't serve a marketing purpose as much to have it on the top of the awning.
Agree. I just don't.
Probably why they're generally on the valance.
You
right?
don't. I just don't want to see someone unwittingly make that decision, and it's very clear in our code that you can't.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point, is I think it's just the preference of the board. If the board wants to take a stand and say that if you can't contemplate a situation where you would ever want something beyond the logo or, you know, what have you on the main part of the awning, then it would be appropriate to do as Trustee Tinaglia suggests.
But you could always come for a variation.
Correct. And I guess if you're open to kind of the administrative review, design commission review to something that we maybe didn't contemplate, then the existing language may suffice. But it really is a preference issue.
Nothing further.
Okay. Anything else from the board? All right. Anything from the audience on this one? Seeing none, what's the will of the board?
Thinking.
So is it to concur with the staff recommendation?
Well, do you want the products stuff
Yeah.
on the awnings or not?
I do.
Yes.
So
And
your motion would be to concur with the staff's recommendation.
Yeah. Is there, are you making that motion, Jay?
I am. I'm just trying to figure out real quick because we got a lot in here. So towards the bottom of C1 or in the middle of C1, there's yellow signage. Is that
It's
staff?
everything in green is what staff had proposed. The design commission did not favor, which is why it's struck out.
Right.
So if what you want to do is go along with staff, everything in green would now be in yellow, actually.
Okay, I got that part. I was just asking what the yellow was.
Yellow is additional words, changing the language from lettering to signage.
Things that staff and the design commission
Everybody agrees with
suggested
that.
should change.
I would concur with the staff's recommendation on awning signage.
Second.
Motion by trustee Scaletta, second by trustee Sidor. Under that, then, is there some discretion, on, as we've talked about, on the part of the staff and design commission to say that that just doesn't work?
Yes.
Yeah,
Staff does
okay.
that now in terms of aesthetics.
I wouldn't
As long as
change.
that's okay, then I'm in favor of the motion. Any further questions or comments? Trustee Glasgow?
Can I just ask, does that go in the other direction as well? Would staff have the ability to say, yeah, we'll go ahead and grant administratively some variance, or does the
They can't-
patron
staff
have to
can't-
come all the way to the board?
Staff
to
can't
end it?
grant a variation. What I think the issue is if somebody proposes an awning with a product placement name, as trustee Tinaglia discussed, and staff thought that that looked awful, staff would say, I don't think this meets the intent of the code, and can you do this or that or whatever, and if they didn't, they would send it on to design commission.
No, I understand the way that, I'm sorry, I want to get in the mic. I understand the way that works. I was just wondering if it goes in the other direction too. Because I didn't want to foreclose things, but if you want to come all the way up to the village board, to the design commission for things like that, I guess I understand.
It would only come to the village board if there was a variation
No,
involved.
I get that. I was just kind of thinking out loud, thinking Sausage's comment of, some meat packing place or something that wanted to end up promoting their wares.
All right, we have
That
a
would be
motion and a
offensive.
second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next.
Okay. Next topic is wall signage for multi-story buildings. Code currently states that each business is allowed one wall sign per street frontage it faces. And that generally works well for, like the example that's up on the screen, a single-story, multi-tenant building where there's a bunch of separate entrances. Every business has their wall sign mounted generally on the wall above their entrance, and code works well in that way. The concern is that, and this obviously is not an example in Arlington Heights here, but the concern is that there's nothing in code that really acknowledges a multi-story building where obviously you can have multiple businesses at multiple levels in different parts of the building, and technically per code, each one of those businesses would be allowed one wall sign per street frontage. So if you have the face of a multi-story office building, you could end up with something like this, just littered with random signs, and that would comply with code. What we've been doing in general is working with building owners and encouraging that there be just one wall sign at the top of the building on a multi-story building when you have a shared common entrance. They don't really have the same need for identifying their entrance that like a multi-tenant single-story building has. Everybody's coming in the same door of a building such as these, and they're using the directory inside the building to find the location they're going to. So generally speaking, the building owners, offer that signage to their primary tenant, I'm sure as part of their lease. And we really haven't had an issue with this, but we wanted to take the opportunity to update code in order to be consistent with that practice. And to be clear, this would be outside of the downtown for wall signage. There's different code requirements currently for the wall signs in the downtown. And currently, code says in the downtown that wall signs are not allowed above the second story. So this is really, we're just talking about all zoning districts outside of the B5 zoning district. So the recommendation is to limit wall signs for multi-story buildings to one wall sign at the top of the building per street frontage. We did include additional provisions in the language here that accommodates the possible situation of let's say you have a multi-story office building and then you have a restaurant down on the first floor and they do have a separate entrance, then they would still be allowed to have signage on that part. So that's kind of the extra language that's built into the code here. But otherwise, that's the That's the issue in the recommendation.
And that was the Design Commission's recommendation as well?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So hopefully this one's a no-brainer.
I'm not gonna cause any trouble.
Trustee Scaletta?
I just have a quick question for you. So we only have several large buildings in town, similar to the ones that you've shown down south and then up north. So, like the building where the temporary police station is right now, that building, how many square feet in the building, you think?
Yeah, I don't know.
100,000?
It's 8-9 story building. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens if, somebody's in there and they have 40% of the building, they put up a sign at the top, and the only way that they're going to be able to get this other big tenant is if they put another sign on top?
If that unique circumstance came up, then they would have the opportunity to request a variation.
Okay. And this is what I always got out of the Building Code Review Board, too, is that you can always go for a variation. You can always go for a variation. I hope that you're the same guy that's encouraging them to go for variations when they're coming up with situations like that. That's all I'm going to suggest, is that I just want to make sure, staff always says they can go for a variation, but you're here before the board and you hear that I'm very passionate about making sure that we don't lose a very large tenant in a very large building because of a code like this. I can understand why you guys want it on record, but we got to make sure that we don't lose out because we have such a strict sign code.
Right. Yeah, we of course would work with a petitioner like that.
Good to hear.
Right, anything from the audience on this? Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Glasgow, second by Trustee LaBedz to approve this recommendation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next.
Okay, perimeter window lighting. The background here is that the current code prohibits miscellaneous attention-getting devices, pennants, character balloons, spotlights. It doesn't specifically prohibit the outlining of windows with LED lighting, which is generally what's used. The concern here is simply aesthetics. It's generally a poor appearance that we've received feedback, primarily from the Design Commission. They felt very passionate about this. They wanted to prohibit that type of lighting, felt it promotes a negative kind of community image and character. So these are some examples of the perimeter window lighting that have been taken here in Arlington Heights. And we did survey other communities. Of the 39 local communities surveyed, the vast majority do currently prohibit this type of lighting. And of the 14 that do not strictly prohibit it right now, we did get feedback that they share this concern and they're considering making changes to prohibit it. So again, options to consider. We don't need to make a change to the code, but it's staff's recommendation and the Design Commission's recommendation to prohibit this type of window lighting. And in doing so, we did include some language in the code that we're not trying to prohibit temporary decorative lighting for a holiday of some sort. So here's the language as it would go into the code. And we did also include in here, the word amortization is not used, but that's essentially what it is. So, if the board approves this tonight, then what this says is that we would notify those businesses that have that type of lighting, but we would then give them up to a year to remove that lighting. So we want them to be able to have a little more time with it to get a little return on their investment, so they don't just have to immediately take it down. They'll have some time to make that adjustment. Otherwise, if there's any questions.
So the Design Commission made some changes to this?
The only change that they made is what's highlighted in green. They just wanted to make sure that the temporary, customary, holiday, and seasonal decorations or lighting, that somebody wasn't going to try to work that angle to do something bold and bright and obnoxious. So they wanted us to put some sort of value on keeping that within a brightness level. So we're recommending not to exceed 4 lumens in brightness per bulb, displayed for a reasonable period of time. That came from the Design Commission. So they're trying to put some parameters on there to give some control over that type of temporary lighting, although we really haven't had any issues or complaints about any type of lighting like that. So,
Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. This one with having to do with the holiday and seasonal lighting, that's where I kind of struggled with the language being proposed. What's reasonable?
Yeah, it's vague. Again, that language came from the Design Commission. That's their recommendation. They wanted to put something in there to limit it.
I
thought the word
understand,
temporary was good enough, but
because that's the problem with something that's that vague, is how do you enforce something that's that vague?
I mean, my feeling
vague?
is that
Not enforceable.
Yeah, it's not, so that to me is a problem. The other thing that also I wonder about, what is seasonal? So what about Halloween? That's a season, and people decorate more and more for Halloween.
Sure.
What about around the 4th of July? You see more of that, and you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy these perimeter lightings and put them out. So I guess I'm struggling with the language of allowing that without more definition.
my response to that would be that this is the type of lighting that this is about, and this is what we've received the complaints about. We haven't received any complaints about Halloween lighting or 4th of July lighting, so I don't think that that's an issue that needs to be addressed. That's our opinion. So we decided just kind of keep it loose. We want to put it in there, let people know that, that's okay to do, but this is not. That's really the goal.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. This is gaudy and not exactly the image that we want to portray here in Arlington Heights. So I guess that's what, I guess I'm worried about somebody pushing the limit on the language, so.
And again, if it becomes an issue, we always have the opportunity to adjust the code language.
True.
If it becomes an issue.
True.
But it hasn't been, so that's why staff's not particularly concerned about that, although Robin may disagree.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you. Steve, does this prohibit signs that just say open also?
No. I mean, the language of this code is talking about outlining your storefront or similar architectural features. So when somebody has a simple open sign that's inside their store, that's really a little bit of a gray loophole in the code, frankly. I think they're generally not that big of a deal and have not been an issue either, and those would not be prohibited by the language of this code. Talks about outlining the storefront or similar architectural features with rope lighting, LED lighting, neon lighting.
Well, aren't those like neon tube
They are,
lighting?
but they're not outlining anything. It's just a small individual sign, and it's inside the store. It really kind of falls in the category of window signage. But again, it is a little bit of a gray area. If those became an issue, that's something we could address separately.
Robin, is that?
I'm sorry, yes.
In your opinion, is that an issue if somebody has like an open sign under this definition?
What do you mean? Oh, an open,
It just says open. as
like
opposed
open or
to-
closed?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't say closed, it would just say open. It would be illuminated.
It's not the perimeter of the
But
window.
it's not going to be around the perimeter of the windows, it's going to be like above the door.
Well, it said similar building features, but, so I
Right,
don't know
but
what, I don't know what that.
This section is designed to prohibit somebody running the lights around a window. So with the sign that says open, lit up, I would say that's not what this is intended to prohibit.
I know that's not the intent, but that's not exactly what it says, but, okay, if it's fine with you.
Okay. Trustee Tinaglia.
So my only concern, I'm in agreement with you and the Design Commission for all of it. My only concern is that particular individual who will push the envelope that says, well, it's St. Patrick's Day, so we're just turning him green for this 45-day period. And before that, it's Valentine's Day. And before that, it's after that, it's Easter. And it's 4th of July, and it's Halloween, and it's Thanksgiving. And often these window lights are, as you say here, LED, and they can be controlled by color. So you come and yell at me because I have them blaring white, but now I'm just going to make them red because it's February 14th. So my caution is for you guys to just make sure that you craft the language in here to avoid the obvious, whatever. Go ahead.
And another option would be to just take all of this mention of seasonal decoration or lighting out completely. I mean, the same exact code language could be reviewed and approved tonight. That's just about, prohibiting the perimeter lighting. And if there's too many concerns about, it's intended to be kind of a little looser to let the, people understand that.
People are going to hang Christmas lights up.
Right,
if
so
they
maybe it
choose
doesn't
to.
need to be in the
They're going
code
to
at
hang
all.
Halloween lights up, and probably no one is going to be offended by that.
Right.
It's this stuff that someone pushes the envelope and just changes the color that frightens me a little bit. But that's all I had to say.
If I can, Mayor, I was just going to say, full disclosure, there was a little bit of a disagreement among staff on this issue. And, the simplest way to reflect that, if it's the will of the board, is to do what was just suggested, that if you just take out reference to the holiday seasonal decorations, leave it at that. And if at some point in the future that gets to be an issue or we run up against what reasonable is, then we could always revisit it. But I think your intent is to take down those permanent lights that people just have to distinguish themselves from their neighbors all year round.
That's really the main issue that we want to focus on.
On board.
Trustee Scaletta.
So 2 questions. The one that has to do with the 4 lumens and brightness per bulb. Would that eliminate the problem?
That provision on its face is probably illegal.
Okay.
Because we're treating what could potentially be speech signs, religious signs, whatever, differently than we're treating every other type of speech.
And it modifies the seasonal holiday section. So if it was the will of the board to take that sentence out, then that would come out as well.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily want to take that out, but I appreciate the comments of my colleagues. So, what if it says instead of that the recommendation from the design commission that not to exceed 30 or 60 days in a calendar year?
It's an impossible sentence to enforce.
Okay, well, it was also impossible when we created the garage sale ordinance.
No, that had specific things. This is impossible to enforce because we're going to have to determine what is a holiday or seasonal decoration. And that's what makes it impossible to enforce. So who decides what's a holiday decoration? Who decides what's a seasonal decoration? As Trustee Tinaglia pointed out, if you change the lights pretty much every month there's a holiday. If you put those lights in and you change those lights so that you run them red for February, green for March, pastel pink
Like we do downtown.
We just have white lights, don't we?
No, we have color lights.
I don't even know.
You should visit our downtown.
I
It's
should more.
fantastic.
So,
No, but
so I think that the problem is that we can't enforce that in any way, shape, or form, and that what will happen is people will use it to keep the lights up year-round, defeating the whole purpose of this prohibition because they can.
My point.
Exactly. That is exactly your point. That's exactly what will happen.
So if we were to take it out, now I'm ready to wrap up. If we were to take it out and somebody had holiday lights up in their window for the upcoming holiday called Christmas, we're not going in there giving them tickets,
We are
right?
not going in there and giving them tickets. We are, that if we take the sentence out, the section reflects the concern we have, which is those pictures from before, as opposed to somebody putting a lit menorah in their window, running Christmas lights around their window. That's not what this is about.
Okay.
And the sentence actually tends to skew it a different way.
The sentence that starts this section,
Correct.
if that were removed, this would be a lot cleaner.
Correct.
Right. I think that's what we should do. We have a motion.
Yes.
I want to
Trustee
say
Glasgow.
I'm concerned if you do it that way, you're going to end up running into selective enforcement issues, that someone has up Christmas lights and then you've got somebody else who puts up, say, lights for Diwali, and you've got, all of a sudden you got to take those down. How are you going to deal with that? Because if you're just going to turn a blind eye to Christmas lights and somebody else wants to put up lights of another culture or religion, then you're going to end up catching a beef.
Just the opposite of that.
No, that's not the way I understand it. You're saying take it out.
Apologize.
Well, you're saying taking it out. Take it out entirely and then not have any enforcement whatsoever provision in here. So we're not going to end up going and enforcing Christmas lights if somebody hangs them in their window. Okay, so you do that. what happens when somebody hangs another religion, then they come back and say, well, you didn't enforce it for Christmas.
What I would suggest is that if we.
Why don't
we're
you
not-
just have set dates from 5 days from whatever holiday? Is this really a problem where you've got lights up year round
Well,
for
yes,
specific, wait for specific holidays?
No, not, I think we may have confused the issue. What we're talking about is 365 days a year. If you can pull up that slide.
I understand what
There-
Trustee Tinaglia is
the-
saying, and I
these
respect
are-
his position.
This is, if we remove the reference to holidays,
Mm-hmm.
then we're taking all holiday decorations out of the equation, period. Whether it's Diwali or Christmas or whatever, we're talking about where a business has these lights up all the time just to distinguish themselves from their neighbors all year round. And that's the activity that we're looking to regulate. And
That I
think-
understand. I'm concerned about the selective enforcement, saying just turning a blind eye to one religion and not another.
Well, I think we'd be turning a blind eye to all religious displays.
So you're going to enforce Christmas lights then?
No, we would be, any type of seasonal display would not be something that we would be enforcing, just as it is today.
How do you delineate this from being a seasonal display then?
I think if we, generally speaking, I think if something is up for extended period of time over, and the purpose of it is to just be for general advertising, if they're not purporting it to be some sort of holiday display, then that would be subject to enforcement.
I don't see any problem in leaving the clause in on the holidays. If you're going to not end up enforcing it on one, you got to give other people an opportunity to do it. Just leave it in. Otherwise, you're banning everything, and you got to enforce everything.
Do we have a
It's a little
motion?
heavy-handed.
Would like to make a motion.
I will.
Trustee Tinaglia.
And I'm going to need help here. Let's go back to that slide where you have the language. I'm going to move to concur with staff's proposed amendments, except to remove the sentence that starts with this section and ends with period of time. Wait, where
There's
is
a
that?
second.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee Baldino. Further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right. Next, Steve.
Okay, one more. Window signage. Current code allows window signage up to 40% of the window area. And by window signage, we're generally talking about applied, usually just like a thin layer graphic that gets applied to the window. Up to 40% of the window area, and it's limited to 20% in the downtown. Permits are not required for this type of signage. It's just allowed. In general, it's intended to be a pedestrian scale type of signage. Signs are intended to be contained within individual windows. So the issue that we're wanting to address here is when some businesses have taken the liberty of putting window signage in each separate window side by side to create a much larger sign. So this is not really the spirit of what this code requirement was intended to allow by allowing window signage, where you bridge it together across to make a big sign. These are examples. I'm not saying these are the best examples or the worst examples, but these are examples where the window signage is contained, the message is contained within an individual pane. So we're just wanting to make the clarification to current code that window signs shall be contained within individual window panes, and they shall not be combined together to form larger signs. The language translated that would go into the code, it includes that same 1 year grace period, so that businesses that may have invested in that type of signage wouldn't be required to remove it immediately. We would notify them and then follow up in a year to make sure that it's been removed.
Makes sense to me. Questions, Trustee Sidor?
Thank you, Mayor. So Steve, what about, I remember when Bentley's moved over to their other location, they put up those full window signs, but they were perforated. So technically, they were within code because a portion of the window was not covered because all those signs were perforated, but the effect of it was like a dot painting, if you will. You know, where you're looking at it from here to there, you can see the entire window and you can see the image that they want to portray. Are we addressing those types of signs which really try to loophole, the intent of this code?
Yeah, I mean, those types of signs are already, I mean, that was basically just a blatant illegal application of a sign doing 100% window coverage regardless of those perforations. You know, they might be able to see through it from the outside, but as you mentioned, when you look at the sign from the outside, it just looks like 100% window coverage. So that's just a violation of the current code standard.
Some of our banks in the downtown area have very high-profile what's the word I'm looking for? Tennis players that have graced, the entire window of a bank. I just would like us to make sure that we enforce that code, that's all.
Understood. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further? Anything from the audience? Do we have a motion on this one?
Just one question. The loft space, so those are display windows, so that is not included in this, correct?
Correct. They're set into the store. They're not in the window.
They're doing a window display with mannequins and
shadow
everything
box.
you're talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah, that's just a
It's
window
not a
display. That's not signage.
It's not window signage.
Those are encouraged and look great, yeah.
Great. We got one clothier left in the downtown. We need to keep them. Thank you.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Just a really quick a comment and a thought. One I thought was very clever several years ago, the old Gap building on the north end of town, which became a phone store, and it had all of that glass, and they created the back, that little window. It was orange for a long time. I think it's blue now, the AT&T phone store. That was some really clever signage that was in a window, and they were working with what they had, and it was outstanding. So you can do some really neat things with windows. It doesn't all have to be just something painted or glued onto the glass. So that's the comment. The question I had is, it was not addressed here tonight, I don't think. What is going to happen in our downtown when some of these other facilities, let's say, whether it's restaurants or offices or what have you, go above the second floor? Are we going to, is that a whole separate category of signs that we're going to talk about? I mean, we have several already on second floors that don't really have signs. One's even higher than a second floor. What's our plan?
Well, we do allow signage on the second floor. So Arlington Town Square, some of the tenants on the second floor do have signage.
Yep.
In downtown, we do not allow it on the third floor. So we have one business that's on the third floor. If they wanted a sign there, we did work with that business before they opened and had a very nice concept. They would need a variation for that.
It would just be a standard variation process.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion on this one?
I would move to concur with staff's recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta, second by Trustee Tinaglia. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no other new business. We'll move on to the report of the village manager, Mr. Recklaus.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Right. And petitions and communications along those same lines. We wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving and would encourage you to join us for the tree lighting ceremony the day after Thanksgiving at North School Park. The festivities begin, I think, around 4, but the tree lighting will be at 5. So anything further from the board? Trustee Scaletta.
The Rotary Club has their Santa Run on December 1st. I don't think we're going to be back together before then.
No.
So December 1st, Rotary Santa Run, downtown Arlington Heights. Find it online.
Sounds good. Anything further? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
By Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all for joining us this evening.